Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for letting me speak to you online today. My name's Fancett, and I'm part of the generous giving team at the Diocese of Newcastle. And I've been invited to share some thoughts with you on the subject of generosity. Now, on 3 occasions in my life, I've been inside a building when the fire alarm has gone off. And fortunately, on 2 of those occasions, it turned out to be a false alarm, but once it was a real fire. There had been some kind of kitchen explosion, the power went off, and a few people were injured, though fortunately, as it turned out, not that seriously. But I joined the hundreds of others, indeed for a large office block, it could be thousands of others, filing down the stairs in the darkness and through the fire escape, not knowing at that stage what had happened and indeed what was happening. But as we walked down those stairs in the darkness, we noticed a small group of people who were walking the other way. As we left the building, these other people were coming in, and they, of course, were the firefighters, grim-faced but determined, not knowing what they might find. They passed us going in the opposite direction to everyone else. They were walking into danger. How much danger? They didn't know at that stage. And they were doing it essentially to save us. They were walking in to help us walk out. Now, the Bible passage we heard earlier from 1 Timothy chapter 6 is essentially an appeal from Paul to Timothy to likewise walk the other way and to encourage those who Timothy is leading to do so as well. Because society as a whole puts its trust in money, having it, trying to keep hold of what we have, and seeking to get more where we can. That's the way the world is, and indeed for many of us, it's the way we live. But Paul says, don't live like that. In fact, he says, flee from that way of thinking. That's strong words. So what's the opposite to trying to keep whatever it is we've got? Well, it's to give it away. And that is what Paul is telling us to do, the opposite to what everyone else is doing. Walk the other way. Now, we all know that in the last few years there's been this cost of living crisis which just seems to be going on and on and on, with very little sign of it coming to an end. So you could say this has been serious and prolonged, and all of us have felt and are feeling the pain. That fire alarm has sounded very loud and clear, and our natural expected response is to leave the building, which in the way I'm talking in spiritual terms would be to cling on to what we have, to cut back on everything we can, cut back on our charitable donations, cut back on what we give to our local church. That's what people would think. But Paul says, no. He says, do not think like that. Don't live like that. Instead, he says, pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, endurance, gentleness. Be rich in good deeds and be generous and willing to share. Now, some months ago, I was rereading the account of the widow who put her 2 small coins into the offering bowl. And you know the story. You'll find it in Mark chapter 12, verses 41 to 43. But as I read it, this time, 6 small words jumped out at me, which I'd never really noticed before. Jesus said the woman gave all she had to live on. What does that mean? All she had to live on. That means surely she gave her food money, in the modern context, if you like, her heating money, her electricity money, her gas money. She gave that away. So why is Paul so certain that this way of life, going in the opposite direction to everyone else, is right for Timothy and is right for the people Timothy is leading and is right for all of us? Maybe it's because of Paul's own experience of learning to live and to be content in God, both when things were going well and during really difficult times when he had nothing, as he describes in Philippians 4, verse 12. Or maybe it's because by this time he had heard the words that Jesus himself prayed, which John records in chapter 17 of his Gospel, verses 13 to 16, when John talks about being in the world, but not of the world. That means we share the same pain as the society we live in. We're not exempt. The cost of living crisis is affecting and will affect us too. We're in this along with everyone else, but we're not of the world. We don't share its values. We have a different way of thinking, a different way of responding. Our calling is not to put our hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put our hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Or maybe it's because Paul knew that Jesus himself had already done exactly the same. When this world stood condemned with no hope, Jesus gave up the security of his glory and majesty, and he walked right in. He came into this world, our world, in order that we might be saved. In our passage from 1 Timothy, I believe the clue as to why we are called to behave differently is summed up in verse 11, where Paul writes, "But you, Timothy, man of God." Read the passage again, but this time substitute your own name instead of Timothy's. Man of God, woman of God. That's why we are to behave in a different way. That's why we walk in the opposite direction to everyone else. We are people of faith. We are people who have chosen to live our lives by different values. I wish I could have grabbed hold of those determined-looking firefighters walking into our building as we walked out. I wish I could have said to them, "Hey guys, it's okay, this is only a little fire, you're going to be all right." But the truth is, I didn't know, not at that point anyway, and I certainly didn't know where their next shout might be after they'd finished at our particular buildings and the dangers which might await them later in the day, later in their lives as firefighters. But what I did know is that they were people who had chosen a job, a lifestyle, if you like, of putting public safety, public protection over and above their own security and well-being. And my appeal to us as people of faith is, will we do the same? Whatever our parish or benefice's mission is, whatever our way of reaching our community, whatever our way of reaching the world around us, it needs our support. So will we walk in? Will we be generous? Dare I say it, will we value caring for others around us more highly, or at least as highly, as our own personal comfort and well-being? Now, I cannot tell you what to give. I can't tell you to what extent you should be generous. I can't tell you not to cut back if that's what you feel is the right thing for you to do. What I can say is, for those of us who count ourselves as people of faith, our calling is different. Our values are different. Our job is to walk in when everyone else is walking out. So let's be generous. Let's walk the other way. Let's hold tight to different values. Let's make sure we are regularly reviewing, prayerfully and honestly, what we're giving to our local parish church. Let's ensure we are not closing our minds to the possibility that actually we could and perhaps should increase. And let's live as people of faith. In this way, let's lay up treasure for ourselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that we too may take hold of the life that is truly life. Thank you so much for listening today. I deeply appreciate it, and I pray for God's blessing on every one of you. Amen.